Uh, so, dear all, it's a pleasure for me today to open this lecture or webinar that we titled actually, How Can We Feel the Pulse of the Country in One Room? And we will hear why is this and why did we name this event like this. Basically, we have envisaged this event as a venue where the method of deliberative poll will be explained alongside with the experience of Deliberative Democracy Lab in implementing this method around the globe, but also with their experience working with us in North Macedonia. We have used this method, the deliberative poll, as a method of consultations with citizens since 2017. And the feedback that we have been receiving from the citizen is a great satisfaction, mostly because they had the chance to share their opinion, but also very importantly to also connect with others, hear other opinion, but at the end they all share the sense that they are contributing to policy making with their discussions with the policymakers and high-level decision makers. So deliberative polling as a method is pioneered by Professor James Fishkin from Stanford University, and as I said, has been implemented around the globe and various countries, so including China, Uganda, Japan, and I think it was also done for the European Commission and European Union. And in the region of the Western Balkans, this method was for the first time conducted or implemented in North Macedonia by us, European Policy Institute in Skopje, in cooperation with the Center for Deliberative Democracy, formerly, and now Deliberative Democracy Lab from the Stanford University. And we had the honor to cooperate with Professor Fishkin and Ms. Alice Siu, the Associate Director of the Democracy Deliberative Lab. And we also had an opportunity to welcome them in Skopje back in 2018 when we conducted the main event in the country. And we do hope to also welcome you again when we do the next one. So this year we conducted the third deliberative poll on the electoral reforms. And the feedback we received was exactly the one that I also shared previously, that they also shared the feeling that they're contributing to the debate, which was missing. So basically they felt that they are given an opportunity to discuss on the electoral reform, which is quite important, but they felt that the thematic is not present at all in the public, so they appreciated a lot the opportunity to be here and to discuss on this important topic. So today I have the pleasure to introduce and to have with us Ms. Alice Siu, who will tell us a short introduction about the deliberative poll as a method, its more important elements, some landmark work done before, and what was the experience working with European Policy Institute and the experience of implementing this method in North Macedonia. Afterwards, we will also have an opportunity to hear from Ms. Sonja Stojadinovic, who has also worked with the European Policy Institute on deliberative polls since 2017, from different capacity, in a capacity of a mentor, to also discuss directly with the citizens, to facilitate basically the discussions on pros and cons on specific topics. And she can also share her insight of how this method worked and what is the feedback that she received from the citizens. So I will end here, and just to say we appreciate a lot of support from the Deliberative Democracy Lab and also National Endowment for Democracy that has supported us since 2017 and continues to do so. So we are very much grateful that we have been able to implement it for the first time in the region here, and the feedback that we get is also from policymakers, it's quite satisfying. So just not to speak much more, I will give the floor to Alice. Thank you, Alice, please.
Thank you. Well, I really appreciate the invitation to speak with everyone today. You'll have to excuse my voice a little bit. I was sick the last few days, so I'm still recovering. So, but today it is very exciting to be able to talk about deliberative polling with you. And as it has already been said, it was implemented in your country, 5 years ago, initially. And so it is amazing really to see the additional projects that have been implemented, and also the feedback that has been consistently been given back in how the method has been reflected on. And many people around the country, around the world that we've been working with have similar thoughts. They enjoy the process and they think it's very effective in engaging them in understanding what public policy is, and the greater point of what it means to actually participate in something like this, because we get to do this in societies where the public's voice is actually valued and it matters. And so it's very important overall, as an overarching goal, to have the public's voice here. So today, I am talking a bit more about deliberative polling, explaining the origins, I suppose, about it, so we can better understand a little bit, why we use deliberative polling, and then I will share some examples of what we've used deliberative polling for around the world. And I think it will give you some insight into how else you could potentially use deliberative polling yourselves. And as it was mentioned, we are at Stanford. We're the Deliberative Democracy Lab. We had a name change over the summer, and where we were formerly at the Center for Deliberative Democracy. We remain on the Stanford campus, but we joined a family of research centers that are very interested in studying not only democracy, but also just the international rule of law, and understanding how we all work together globally. And so it's been very nice to have a new home for us. But on deliberative polling, one of the primary purposes is really to solve for the problems that we have seen in traditional public opinion. And traditional public opinion is what many of you are probably very used to, which is you see a lot of survey results, either on TV or on news sites, or people talking about it like, oh, some percentage of our population believes this or that. And that is your traditional public opinion. And unfortunately, we have found that very traditional forms of public opinion often have a lot of problems. And Jim Fishkin, who's our lab director, and when he first thought about deliberative polling, He was hoping to solve for these three problems. Well, first problem he was hoping to solve for is rational ignorance. And rational ignorance, it sounds fancy, but really the simple answer, simple way to explain it is we purposely decide we're going to ignore something because we have not enough time to think about a lot of these, about something. And we're rationally ignorant oftentimes about public policy or issues related to government because it's perhaps not very relevant to us. And also because we have so many other things to do. As students, you have school and you have homework, you have friends, you have family, you have work, maybe you have children, or you have to catch up on all the things that you care about in the world. And probably the last thing that some of us think about is what is actively being talked about in government or public policy that is currently being decided on. And I think everyone, including myself, we are almost always rationally ignorant when it comes to a lot of issues about public policy, because many of it does not affect us daily. And so we decide not to think about it. And the second problem here is called phantom opinions. Phantom means basically something that just doesn't exist. And unfortunately, a lot of times when people are asked about whether they know about something, they often actually provide answers they don't know. The best example of this is there was a professor at University of Cincinnati in the States, and his name is George Bishop. He decided to run a survey called the 1975 Public Affairs Act. And he wanted to run a survey about this act to see what the public thought about it. Now, the special thing about this act was it does not exist. And so he ran the survey just like any other survey. And as you would expect, the public had opinions about this fake act. What this tells us is that many people in our society are embarrassed or don't want to tell others when they don't know something. And they would rather just say they support or oppose something than just say, I don't know. And the even more funny point is 20 years later, in 1995, because this was first done in 1975, the Washington Post, which is a fairly prominent paper in the US, decided to do an anniversary of this survey. So they ran another survey. And as you would expect, the results came back and people had opinions about this fake act. So in 20 years, the human race has not evolved, and we still continue to tell people that they know something, even though it does not exist. And this is all to say with this example that if people are just sharing opinions about things that don't exist and they don't know about, how much can we trust some of this public opinion that we are constantly relying on? Many governments, many policymakers often cite survey results as the basis for why they decide to do one thing or another. And if this is the case, how reliable are all these results that are being used? The last point, the last problem is one that unfortunately deliberative polling can help a little bit on, but it doesn't solve the problem. And that is communication with people that are like-minded. We as humans, no matter where we're from, we like to talk to people that are like us. We like to be around people that have similar thoughts to us, maybe even look like us. And this is not exactly a problem, because in one sense is that because it makes us feel comfortable. But when it comes to consuming information, I think many of us have heard perhaps the term echo chamber or people being polarized. It is all meant to describe that our society is increasingly becoming more isolated, where people who think the same tend to talk to each other. And there is a little less, or in some countries, a lot less, of people talking with people that have different views. Here's some examples for all of us. When we are online and let's say we are searching for news, I don't know which of the popular news sites in North Macedonia, but in the US, some people will read the CNN, New York Times, maybe Fox News, maybe something else. But all of those news sources you can tailor to yourself. If you only want to read about news on sports, you could open your page and only see news about sports. Or if you were to use a news service like Google News or Apple News, you could actually tailor the type of news sources that you get news from. And then, I've read a lot of research that says a large amount of people actually get news from social media platforms, from Twitter, from Facebook, from Instagram, that news information that gets posted by people within their network, or reading news that is shared by certain news sites on these types of platforms. And you can imagine that if you're getting news from within your own network, because your network is like you're probably getting news that you like to read. And all of this is to say that when we only get information that we like, that we're comfortable with, then we have essentially blocked off, rationally removed much of the information in the world that we don't want to see. This becomes a problem when we need to talk about public policy issues or talk about problems that exist in our society. Back in many, many decades ago, in the US, and I'm not sure what it was like in other countries around the world, but there were only a handful, maybe 3 or 5 TV stations. And in the US, at 5 or 6 p.m. every night, we can talk about whether this still exists in your country, but back then, every night, every evening, there was the evening news. And everyone in the country, no matter what you believed, all watched the evening news at the same time. And the next day, if you went to work or went to school, you would know that the person next to you on the bus, sitting in your class or at work, probably watched the evening news last night. And because of that, knew what happened in their country or in their neighborhood, because most of the country watched the same news information. And perhaps that allowed for some conversation to be had the next day. But now, in most countries in the world, in most societies, because we all have our own set of information that we look at every day, at any moment, we actually don't know what the person next to us, even on Zoom, our little square, that we see next to us, we have no idea what information that person next to us has and what information or what news they consumed in the last week, because they may have gotten their information from their social network feed. And we have no idea what their network likes to read or what information they like to consume. And we could have basically be consuming entirely different news information. When this happens, this means that our world of information is entirely different, and it becomes a problem when we want to talk together as a society. How do we know that we all share some basic forms of information? And this is where deliberative polling really comes as serving as a foundation, a basis for lots of the information that the participants discuss. One of the features of deliberative polling is that they're given balanced information. This may seem obvious or something that makes sense, but when we think about it in our current society, since we don't know what information people have, when we provide our participants in the deliberative polling sessions with a set of information, people actually know that everyone that participates have received this set of information. Whether they read it or not, we can come back to that, but they know that everyone has this basic set of information. They know what the arguments are and a general sense of what we're talking about. In many other conversations, maybe even for your classes or for work, you may not know whether the person next to you actually knows what the basic information is. And this is actually a very key component and becoming even more important as people's information becomes more separated in society. Other aspects of deliberative polling include small group discussion, and then expert Q&A, which there's a larger panel where we invite people, experts, to come in just to do question and answer. It's not lecturing or giving speeches in any way. The participants are also selected through random sampling, representative samples to represent a country or a city or a state or multiple countries. We sometimes have control groups that don't deliberate, so we can see the effects of deliberation. And most importantly, we have pre and post deliberation surveys that so we can capture the opinions and see whether and how opinions have changed after deliberation. These are the basic components, and you can see that each of the components are not anything special, but the combination, the process, and the rigor that is applied to executing the deliberative polling process is what is really key in terms of having a process that is also trusted and has social science basis for it. But all is to answer this central question about what the people would think under good conditions. And the good conditions we create are all of the components we talked about, and including in having an environment for people to actually have good discussions. And this is where having moderators or the structure of the deliberation of what the moderator would do is also very critical to this step. This is the map to show the countries that we've worked in, 30 plus countries over the last decades, 100 plus projects. It's been very exciting to be able to do so many. In fact, this fall, we're doing a global project that involves 32 countries. And all the countries will be deliberating within a 10-day period in December. And at the end of the process, over 6,000 people will have deliberated together. So I wanted to share some examples. This one is from a series of projects we did in the 1990s. So ages ago, much further back than many of us will remember, maybe, or many of you have not been born yet. But this is from the state of Texas, where we did a series of deliberative polls about where the participants wanted their energy to be from, whether they want their energy to be from coal, from renewable energies, from wind, solar, all the different types. And we actually asked them even how much extra they would pay to have wind and solar as a form of energy source for their energy. And you can see from the graph here that there was an increase percentage of people that were willing to pay extra. But the extra special result of this series of deliberative polls is that back in the 90s, when this was first done, Texas was actually the last in wind power in the country. And in 2007, I believe, Texas actually became the first state in wind power in our country. And largely due to these deliberative polls that were had in the 90s. Because of these deliberative polls, the public utility commissions in the state invested in wind power as their primary source of energy. And because of that, Texas has now become the #1 state in wind power. This has really been dramatic change for the state, and just goes to show what deliberation can do practically for people. And this was back in the 90s when climate change was not a popular subject for participants to discuss. And definitely the content of this subject was something that was not top of mind for people. Another example I want to share is on the other side of the world, from Mongolia. So in Mongolia, we actually had a deliberative poll on amending its constitution. And this was done because Mongolia is the first country in the world to pass a law on deliberative polling that requires the country to have a deliberative poll nationally before any constitutional amendments are made. It was spectacular. This is a picture of all 600 plus people that were there for this deliberation. But this project is even more special because I don't know what it's like in North Macedonia, but trying to amend a constitution for any country is one of the most difficult things to do. And for many governments, there has always been a long-standing question how you engage the public in amending the country's constitution. Mongolia decided it would be a deliberative poll. Other countries have tried to do referendums or some sort of consultation. In fact, we did one for Iceland's constitutional reform back in 2019, and the parliament is still debating its results. But this is quite historic because there have not been very many countries in the world that have actually involved the public in amending its constitution. It's one for really to understand what it means to involve the public in updating a country's constitution. We can talk more about this later on, but this is one to study and really to understand how governments should be working in trying to protect or edit its constitution to reflect what the society present day is thinking. Now, as we talk about bringing North Macedonia into one room, we had America in one room in 2019. This was a very large project in our country. Before 2019, it had been a while since we did a national project in the US. And for this project, we had over 500 people nationally gathered in person. This was done in 2019. And we covered 5 different issues: immigration, healthcare, economy and taxes, environment and foreign policy. The picture that you see here is actually from a clip from New York Times. We actually got very substantial news coverage from the New York Times, where they actually were at the event and they took pictures of every single person, all 500 plus people at the event. And as a front page on the New York Times, they had every single picture of the participants to show what America looked like in one room. It was the most dramatic front page cover that I had seen, and really made an impact on the type of media coverage that was received for this project. The results were all the more impressive as well. For immigration, we actually saw that people that were more conservative, Republicans, changed very significantly after deliberation. So the first one he listed here is support forcing undocumented immigrants to return to their home countries before applying to live and work in the US. Republicans started at 79%, which is a pretty overwhelming majority, and it dropped to 40% after discussion. So after deliberation, half the people decided that they would not force undocumented immigrants to return home. And then on support reducing the number of refugees allowed to resettle in the US, that dropped from 66 to 34%. On the other side, in terms of supporting more high-skilled workers and low-skilled workers, those increased dramatically, 20, 30% after deliberation. This is all to show that after I think they met Thursday, Friday, well, half of Thursday, so 3.5 days. After 3.5 days together, deliberating on these issues, they saw very dramatic opinion changes on these issues. And they were in their small groups, deliberating, just as I was describing, and then they had larger groups with plenary sessions to get their questions answered. These are extremely dramatic results to have after just a few days of deliberation. But the Republicans are not the only ones that changed. On the Democratic side, those who describe themselves as Democrats, there were some dramatic changes on policies that really are traditionally seen as more liberal. Support for raising the federal minimum wage to $15, that dropped from 83% to 59%. The issue about minimum wage is one where in the US, most people will say, yes, that's a great idea. Everyone should have a minimum of $15. But not only in this project, but we've asked this question in a number of other projects we've done as well. And consistently, after deliberation, the support for having a federal minimum wage drops very much. And this is really due to them really understanding what it means to have a federal minimum wage, and also the underlying problems that it does not address. Because having a minimum wage is a small fix to the greater problems of economic inequality that exist in our country. And they start to realize that in these discussions. But you can also see this one most dramatic drop is for a government-funded baby bond. A baby bond is something that was proposed by a number of presidential candidates in terms of when a baby is born, or the moment the baby is born, they get a government bond of a certain amount of money, and then that bond grows over time, and people can, when they become 18, they can withdraw that money to use it for some purpose. Initially, 62% of people supported this, but afterwards, 21% supported. Huge dramatic drop in this. So these are all traditionally very liberal policies. And now you see that such huge drops in what people would, they change their minds on this after deliberation. So this is just to show that the movement in deliberation was among everyone in deliberation across the board, not just of one type of people or people from one type of party. The change and movement was happening after deliberation among everyone that was there. I know that I am running out of time and I should pass this. I just wanted to share, and there's probably not time to show this video, but when you get a chance, we have, there's a CNN clip on our website that shows in about 2-3 minutes what the people in the deliberation at American One Room thought about, and how dramatic their experience was like for them. So you should definitely take a look at that. But before we leave, I wanted to share with you, we did a second American One Room last year on the issue of climate and energy. We had close to 1,000 people deliberate. And this was actually done online on our deliberation platform. It's an AI-assisted deliberation platform that actually does not require human moderators, because we built in the features of the moderator into the platform. But we saw just as dramatic opinion changes through our online platform compared to our face-to-face. We had close to 1,000 participants and a nationally representative sample of our participants. I want just to show you a couple of these results. This one was about greenhouse gases, and the statement is that we should take serious action to reduce greenhouse gases, because waiting to do so would be irresponsible for our kids' future. And you can see before and after there's an increase, 63 to 78%. But we broke it down by political party, and you can see the differences. And dramatically, you can see the increase in supporting this statement by Republicans going from 36 to 57%. And these increases across party and differences across party are also very prevalent in other discussions, topics that we had. This one was about eliminating coal. You can see the dramatic increase by Republicans and by independents. And then we have eliminating gas. Not as much support from Republicans on this issue, and still increases across all three of the political parties. But not all topics had increases. This one was about eliminating the sale of new gas and diesel cars and trucks. Republicans were not in favor of that before or after deliberation, and independents didn't move at all. They didn't think that they should be eliminating at all. So you can see that deliberation is moving opinion change on certain topics, even within climate. But there are some things that deliberation can't. Even after deliberation, they don't move on. And when we run deliberative polls, the first thing is we actually don't expect opinion change, even though we get substantial opinion change every time. Because the crux of deliberative polling is that we want people to understand the pros and the cons of these policy options, and for them to really come to understand what their opinions are. And so, for this, they talked about it, they had deliberation about it, they shared some advantages and disadvantages, but people still thought that this is not something that they could commit to. But they were able to commit to, as you saw above, eliminating coal and to some level, eliminating oil. So it's very interesting as we go through the types of options that people are comfortable doing and those that they are not. And I have much more information to share as well, but I do want to turn this over to our moderator for one of our past events. But I think it's very exciting to be able to share so much of this, so much of these results with you, and to share with you what deliberative polling has been doing around the world. I talked about our AI-assisted deliberation platform. This is something we can perhaps talk about more another time too, because we are at our Deliberative Democracy Lab not only interested in promoting deliberation in different countries, but we're interested in everyone in a country, everyone in a society to be able to deliberate. And not only people that are invited into these events. And in order for any society, everyone to have the chance to do so, it needs to scale. Deliberation has to be able to scale to everyone, millions of people in a country, and in fact, globally. And in order to do that, we unfortunately can't have thousands of moderators at the same time. And that's why we created the platform to be able to scale deliberation. It's been used now in 10 different countries, several different languages, and it's been extremely successful. And I think that it's being able to practice what it means to deliberate and talk to people that are different from us is really essential to having a productive society. And if any of us want to remain in a democracy, listening to other people is really not an option. Listening to people that disagree with us is something we have to do. And so I hope that we'll all continue to do so, and that we'll have moderators that will help us too. So I will turn this over. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Alice. It's been quite interesting, and you have raised already the interest, because I see raised hand and also already question and answers. But I just want to say that we will have to be a little bit more patient and hear out Sonia Stojadinovic before we pose the questions. And especially, it was really, really interesting to hear about the problems that you actually wanted to sort out when you came up with a method. So like the rational ignorance and phantom opinions, also with the echo chambers, which is really that something that we want to also do on at least some topics, because we are quite aware we cannot do that on everything. And the last sentence which you finished, it is, I do believe that is the key of what we should strive to do. Talk to people that have different opinions, or to people that disagree. So ending on this, I will give the floor to Sonia Stojadinovic on talking from a different angle on her experience engaging with the method, with the people directly. So Sonia, please, and afterwards we continue with the questions session.
Thank you very much, Dita. Thank you very much, Alice. It was not only useful presentation, but it was a presentation that made me smile on one or 2 points, because it is literally the opinion of the American citizens and the citizens around the world, where you practice the deliberative polling is and their behavior is also very similar to the Macedonian citizens. One of the moments that made me laugh was about the phantom opinion. In my experience, with 3 times organizing and being a moderator of the deliberative polling in Skopje, the conclusion is that the Macedonian citizens also want to have opinion about everything, but also they're very hard to admit that they don't know everything, and they didn't read the material. They didn't read about everything that is supposed to be discussed in the event. But also they want to impose their own opinion. And also they don't want to admit that they did something they don't know, or they don't know the given subject in depth. And also one of the additional moments that I also notice is that very much we are living and moving and working in our intellectual bubbles. Our intellectuals, or the NGO, or the politicians, or people around all classes in the society, that we want to discuss and just express opinions with the like-minded people. And this deliberative polling was the completely opposite approach, like to put different-minded people into one room for two days, actively talking to each other, not arguing, but talking, because in my 3 years of practice, I didn't have moments in situation when participants were arguing. I didn't allow that, but it was interesting when you had a heated discussion, but the heated discussion was not going in direction of insulting, but it is going to the direction of fruitful expressing of experience and ideas from the participants that were very good to put it then into paper and to deliver it to the politicians. How many useful and interesting ideas people had about given topics. So my experience in three events on 3 different event and topics discussion, especially this year about changing of the system of voting in Macedonia, is that people first, when you have 10 people from different backgrounds, from different cities from the country, from different nationalities, from different education, they first start from expressing their personal experience and their personal beliefs. Afterwards, when they have in front of them somebody who has completely different interests and completely different experience, but also offers some similar and like-minded solution for the given problem or for the given topic, it is interesting to see how people withdraw and put their fingers, literally put their fingers on their heads and say, okay, this is a good idea. Let's just discuss about it. One of the examples was when there was a discussion, should the people from abroad, from migration and from diaspora should vote or not? Half of the group had families, very close families in diaspora. They wanted them to vote. Other ones, they said, no, they're not living here, so they are not, should not be allowed to vote. But on the end, the discussion was also the questions and the ideas that they delivered, and they wanted those ideas and questions to be delivered directly to the politicians, were very useful and very mind-changing, not only for them in the group, but also for us as spectators, as moderators, and also for the organizers of this deliberative polling system. So what is also out of my other experience, you have 10 people in one group that you're talking with for almost, you're together with them, not only in the event, but out of the event for 48 hours. You go there into depth, into their lives, into their interests, into their trying to understand them, how they think, how they live, and what their interests and their problems. Do they have similar interests? Do they have different interests? Do they have similar problems or different problems? What is similar for all of them? They all want to talk, and they all want to express their opinion, but they all want to be listened. Not only to be listened from us as hosts and organizers, but they want to be listened and taken into consideration by our current politicians, because they have where to express their opinion. Facebook, social media, on the streets, on the family gatherings, but they want to be listened, and they want to be taken for, not for granted, but for citizens. They are contributing into the country and contributing for the good. What is interesting from the other side, in my experience, and when on the very beginning, when I asked them, did you read the materials? 90% of them said no. I said, how can we discuss if you didn't read the material? But they have an opinion about it. No, you didn't read the material, so you cannot have an opinion. That is, I can connect the situation directly to your explanation about the phantom opinion. So they have some kind of opinion, but on an unknown subject. But when I force them to read the material, the approach is completely something different. And when I ask them, because the standards and the conditions for us moderators is not to reveal anything about us, only our name, because they know it from the placards, how I push them to talk. I ask them, where you're coming from? Present yourself. I'm coming from Veles. I'm not living in Skopje. I've been living for a certain period in Skopje and abroad, so I have some kind of experiences from different societies. And when they start to talk, who is living where, what kind of society problems they have, what kind of personal problems they have, and the discussion starts to steer. And this is the moment where moderators have to control the discussion, because people, like I said, people really want to talk, and people very easy go out of the subject for discussion. So you just pull them and ask them questions. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? You see, and you control, because it's not a big group, it's only 10 people. You just control also who is not talking and who is ashamed to talk. Provoke those people to talk, because from those people, sometimes very smart and very interesting questions and solutions and suggestions come out. So when you gather and when you push all them to talk and to be active, not only in these discussions, group discussions, but also into the additional event, when they have a chance to post a question or post a suggestion on the present politicians who are on the given day and who are on the given topic. So it is interesting that people also on the end of the event, they're very grateful that they're invited. Second, they had a chance to express their opinion, not only in the group, but also in the public, and also to discuss directly with the politicians they are voting for, and they are paying their salaries from the taxes, from the tax system. Because also many citizens forget that the politicians who are ruling are paid from the citizens' taxes. And citizens are allowed and have a right to criticize, and even to not to attack, but to criticize the politicians who are not deliberating everything that they were promised. So when you, for the students and for also other participants, it is interesting because people, like I said, they want to talk, and this they're really grateful that their opinion is heard, and there's a chance their opinion to be put it into the law or into some governmental decision, and to have the real change and a real result in reality from their experience, from their deliverance, from their suggestion, as a citizen who is living, citizens who are living all over the country, not only in the capitals of Skopje, but all over the country. Because when you give a voice to a citizen who are living in some village in northern part of Macedonia or southern part, who you got for heaven's sake place, and you cannot find it on the map, they're very much grateful. But also we have to be grateful that they broke their fear of public talking, and they express everything they think, and they are very much ready to contribute into the positive changes into the Macedonian country and Macedonian society. I'm very open to questions for the students, and my experience is that people are very also additionally very prone to talk, like I said, the private problems, but only one psychological soft approach, a human approach, when you want to push them to talk, you can learn a lot from them. I, as a moderator, didn't learn only from Alice and from Erdita and from all this deliberative polling new system, how democracy can be delivered, but also I learned a lot about our fellow citizens and how they deal in life and how they deal with their problems in the living communities. Thank you for your time, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Sonia. And I think now we've reached the moment that we can open the floor for questions. I've seen the Professor Jovan Ananias' hands since we started, and apologies that we left you for this part, but we wanted to keep up and listen firstly to Alice and then Sonia. And I just also want to say that we were expecting also Professor Fishkin, but he's just recovering from major surgery, and we do hope to also host him perhaps maybe in Skopje, because we're continuing still with the deliberative poll for the next 2 years. So this is also good news. And also want to share the great interest that we have also from students, because each year, each time that we basically did the main event, we had students helping the moderators, and they were quite interested in the method and on the subjects as well, and they have continued to express interest to join. So that is why we are very happy to discuss today with them. So now I will give the floor to Professor Jovan, please. Jovan? I will check, and colleagues will check. Basically, maybe there is a problem with the microphone, but there's also a question which I will read. The question goes: what are the key challenges when organizing multi-country deliberative polling events? So I guess, Alice, this is for you.
Sure. Multi-country deliberative polling event. So we have done the European Union one in 2007, one in 2009, where we did the entire European Union, and 27 countries with 21 languages. I think the challenge, of course, one that we think of is language. In actually the first European wide deliberation, we held the deliberative poll inside the European Parliament. And because it was in the European Parliament, we had access to the interpreters from the European Parliament and all the equipment, etc. And so we were able to do all of the small groups and the plenary session with simultaneous translation. You can imagine in the small groups, one of the things we had to sort out is how many languages to have per small group. And we ended up having languages that are called pivot languages, where you would need to have, for example, English, Macedonian, and then, for example, I don't know, Greek, where English is used as the pivot, where you have English to Macedonian, and then English to Greek, and then someone would do that so that everything is pivoted through English. So that was actually one of the challenges in sorting out the languages and how many you could have per small group. And we wanted to have as many languages as possible per small group so that you could have as many people from different countries in each of the small groups. So that was one of the challenges. Everything else in terms of organizing and such, they're no different from organizing any other deliberative poll, but the language was certainly different in the multi-country one. Other questions?
Well, we're checking for other questions or answers. You can all hit the hand here if you have questions. My question I would like to ask, from your perspective, was actually North Macedonia an interesting case to perform deliberative poll? We are so happy to see our case in your website, along with these other countries much bigger than ours. So from your perspective, please, how was it?
I mean, of course, I think the most recent deliberation about political reform, or the types of political system that people were thinking about is extremely interesting. I think many countries in the world need their public to think about these issues, but unfortunately, many governments do not have the foresight to allow their public to really understand what it means to have certain types of political systems or electoral systems. And it becomes very difficult to understand what the public wants. So I think the last deliberative poll that was done to talk about political reform was fascinating to see, and especially the results of what the public would think about this. And coincidentally, North Macedonia was not the only country around that time. So we actually had Peru around the same time, although they did their deliberation online, talk about political reform as well. And I think that for better or worse, many scholars have talked about the decline in democracy globally in many countries. And I think that has stimulated many countries to start thinking about if they are to remain in a democracy, what the country needs to do, our changes it needs to make in order to remain a democracy. And so, in fact, we ourselves in the US are planning for a deliberative poll on political reform for next spring as well. So I think it is, I think that one was a fabulous one. It's very interesting to be able to compare results because the topics that you had were very similar to the Peruvian one, and also topics that we will have in our US case next year as well. So it's very interesting to be able to compare across countries too, views about the same issues. And of course, the initial two deliberative topics about EU accession were critical to the country. And those were, had excellent results too. But I think the most recent one was really fascinating from a perspective of thinking about what it means for the future of democracies in different countries.
Thank you, Alice. I have a question for Sonia. Can you, Sonia, make a comparison between the first debate and the last one? Are there changes in the behavior and mentality of the citizens? And then there's the next one for Alice. How can this method contribute in policy making? How can these deliberations shape actually the policies? So Sonia, please, first.
I think if the question refers to the first debate where when it was about the Macedonian European integration, and the last one was about the voting system, I think that there was a little bit change, but also there was a quite little bit expressed anger towards the European Union because there were changes and blockages in 2007 and 2022. So in the last first, the Macedonians were not, those citizens were not quite informed about the Macedonian European integration, because that is a long-term process, and not a process just we have a European passport and we can travel where we want and we have an open market. We have to fulfill all the standards that are required by the European Union. So in that debate, the Macedonian, the citizens that took participation were not quite informed, because you have 35 chapters on which you have to negotiate, and which you have to implement all changes and all standards. So they're really not well informed. But when it comes about voting system, they were really good informed, and there were personal experiences, like I said, about the voting right of the diaspora, or the voting right of how should they vote or should they not vote, and how the representative, should they even, we have representatives of diaspora in our parliament. They were very good. They were much better, and they were the questions and the ideas about the changes were also on the same level, besides the fact that the participants in the group were coming with a quite different backgrounds, professional and educational and societal, and they were much better than the first lecture. But it also happened 5 years ago, the first debate, and also citizens from the first debate, some of the citizens from the first debate informed the citizens from the last debate they can participate, and this kind of deliberative polling event is very good for expressing their opinion. So that's what I said, that when you have 100 people in the hotel from all around the country, from even smallest villages or towns, it's quite a good debate, and it's quite a high level of satisfaction from the citizens as a participants.
Yes, and I do think that the first time basically that we did it in 2017, people didn't know about this method, had never heard of it, and they came with this attitude of not knowing what's been going on. But since we also engaged with the media a lot, and in each time we had the 2 days, going on TV shows, which are really watched in the country. So basically, second time and the third time, people had heard about the method, and when they came, they were more interested to take part, to see how the process goes and how they can contribute. So I do really think that also engaging media in this process was crucial, to acquaint the public with the process and the method. And somehow we saw also an increase of their interest to take part in the survey and then to come and discuss. And now, Alice, going back to your question, I don't know if you want me to read it again, but it is, how can this method contribute in policy making, and how can these deliberations can actually shape the policies?
It's a great question. I would say to have actual policy impact for any project, you need policymakers to be involved. So in projects where we have had the most impact, we either were commissioned by the government or policymakers were involved in the project from the beginning. And not to say that they promised, that the government promised or the policymaker promised to make changes, but they were present and they were there to witness the entire process. So they know not only what the topics are and what the arguments are, but they saw the discussions that the public had. And being able to witness and observe those discussions is very powerful, for policymakers, because they get to see what actually people are struggling with when they are having these discussions. So I think if the intention is to have policy impact, having government and policymakers involved is important. But that's not to say that's the only way. Afterwards, we've had projects that write up papers and advise policymakers on various issues as well. It just depends on how open governments are to listening to these results. And it unfortunately requires a lot of effort on the part of organizers to make sure that that governments do in fact listen. That is a whole other question that is that probably requires another few hours to talk about, how we get the governments to listen. But to put simply, I think that having them involved is probably the first step in doing so.
Thank you, Alice. Is there any other question? Okay, since I do not see a raised hand, and I think then we're about to end, I just want to thank you so much for working with us throughout these years and for continuing to do so, for your support, which has been very crucial for us. Also, the National Endowment for Democracy for supporting us in this process, and all the mentors and all the people, and also students for following us and joining us. So I do hope we will have more cooperation in the next poll, deliberative poll that we do sometime around to 2024. So the main event. but we will continue to work on it this year, next, and 2024. So thank you so much, and hope to welcome you in Skopje, and Sonia, hope to continue our cooperation. Thank you so much, and see you on another opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.